Welcome back to WCCF Tech TV, everyone, and I really don't have a great way to introduce this topic or talk about it in any other way than it was something that happened while I was testing Far Cry 5. And if you want to see the full breakdown on that, link down in the description below for graphics cards, CPUs, and some additional CPU testing, because what I found in that game was the i5 8600K, while it was faster than the Ryzen 7 1700 when it was clocked to 5 gigahertz, and it was still severely bottlenecking the 2080 Ti. So it would run fine on almost any of the GPU, actually all of the GPUs, up until the RTX 2080. So the RTX 2060 and 2070 actually were running better than the 2080, and the 2080 Ti, while it had higher averages, was all over the place in frame rate. So that coupled with monitoring the core count or the core utilization, I found that the 8600K was genuinely bottlenecking these two cards, more so the 2080 Ti at all resolutions. So 1080p, 1440, and 4K, when generally what will happen is, as you increase the resolution, that bottleneck will, if it exists, will depreciate and deplenish and go away. So that's why a lot of times the Core series and the Ryzen series will match each other at 4K resolutions when most of it is handed back over to the GPU. But Far Cry New Dawn seems to be a bit of a unique case in the sense that there was bottlenecking in every resolution with the 2080 Ti. Again, the 2080 not so much. Those results are going to be in that article linked in the description, but today in the video we're going to talk specifically the 2080 Ti and how it scaled from the i5 at 5 gigahertz, so the 8600K, 6 cores, 5 gigahertz, and to the i9 9900K with all cores at 4.7, and then we went ahead and tested again at all cores at 5 gigahertz, just to see if there was still yet more bottlenecking. And what we found was pretty interesting. So we'll look at those real quick first, but I just want to let you know that after we look at those, we're going to look at core scaling and see how it works in this game as we reduce the core and thread count all the way down to 2 cores from 8 cores and 16 threads. So let's take a quick look at the graphics card results with the 2080 Ti. So this is the RTX 2080 Ti Founders Edition on a Z370, yes, a Z370, not a Z390, Z370 EVGA classified K motherboard with 16 gigabytes of DDR4 3200. What we see here is the Core i5 is significantly behind the i9 in both scenarios. So the i9 at 4.7 gigahertz rather than 5 show the 0.1% lows increase from 66 up to 80, and you see the 1% lows go from 78 to 88%, and the averages jump up by 13 FPS. So that overall is a good indication that there was a bit of a bottleneck, and it's rare with a 6-core, 6-thread CPU in games. Like, we want to see more utilization, and we're seeing it here. But you see, moving it up to 5 gigahertz again alleviates even more bottlenecking that was occurring, and even at all 8 cores and 16 threads at 5 gigahertz, we still saw a few of the cores pegging out 100% and limiting that average FPS, but still see a drastic increase on the 0.1% lows, going from 66 up to 84. That does really smooth out the gameplay. What about 1440p? That's where this gap should shrink, or so I thought, and then I realized there's just as much bottlenecking that was going on at 1440p, and it shows us again that those 1080p results, even with the 5 gigahertz i9 9900K, are still bottlenecked, because essentially the 2080 Ti is performing exactly the same at 1440p as it did at 1080p. Only the averages dropped by 2 FPS on the average for the 9900K at 5 gigahertz, and that's even faster still than 4.7. And at 4.7, we still see the same frame rates roughly that we saw at 1080p. Even at 1440p, the 9900K in this game is bottlenecking the GPU. And moving into 4K or UHD, 2160p, however you want to put it, we see again a very surprising change in numbers. At 4.7, we see the average doesn't change a whole lot, but the 0.1% lows come up drastically. But the i9 at 9900K at 5 gigahertz shows 62 FPS on the 0.1% lows and at 84 average FPS, which is fantastic at 4K gaming with this particular title, and shows that even at 4K, 8 cores and 16 threads seems to be a little bit of a limiting factor. But here's the real question. Is it the 8 cores and 16 threads, or is it the cores that really matter in this game? To find that out, what we did was we left it at 5 gigahertz, and then we stepped it down from 8 cores, 16 threads to 8 cores, 8 threads, disabled hyper-threading and reduced the core count. Now, is this indicative of i5, i7, whatever? Nah, I don't have all those chips on here. It would have to be the same scenario like 7700K. It's a bit convoluted, but what we're looking at here specifically is core scaling and those performance numbers while you move from hyper-threading on, off, core count, yada yada. And what we found here was this game does scale very, very well to a point. Looks like 8 cores. The game really does prefer real cores, but we'll utilize those threads, and you can see that down at the bottom where a 2-core, 2-thread chip does jack all, but a 2-core, 4-thread chip performs a bit behind a 4-core, 4-thread CPU configuration, but it's not what I would want to play this game at. It was stuttery, and there was visible stutters going on there. But once you move up to 4 cores and 8 threads, you can see there that the 4-core 8-thread configuration is actually better than the 6-core 6 threads. So something like a 6700K or 7700K would probably perform better than the i5 8600K or 9600K in this title. And you can see that going from 6 cores to 12 threads jumps that minimums up quite a bit. But what's really interesting here is to see that the 8-core 8-thread configuration is hands down the fastest. So the idea here is what you're really seeing happen is you're getting full core utilization that's not having to split resources between threads, and it's resulting in it evidently kind of seems to be the peak of where the scaling goes, at least on the mainstream chips. I don't have an X299 system, and I really don't like the way those perform in games with their mesh architecture, and that's just, I'd rather, for gaming purposes, this is one of the reasons we don't have X299, and we don't have a Threadripper setup that we use. We stick to the mainstream chips that people would probably be buying for gaming. So really cool to see in this title this really wild, it's not really wild, it's actually good. I like to see this, but if you look over at the article, you'll see that something like the 2080 or 1080 Ti, because they perform essentially identical in this game from what I can tell by looking at others. No, still don't have a 1080 Ti and probably won't get one at this point because they're just so expensive. But the point being, 28 up to that level, you're good. You're probably going to be good, but past that with the 2080 Ti or multi-GPU, I don't even know if this game supports it, but you're going to look at some bottlenecking issues at lower resolution. So the idea here is 2080 Ti, definitely use it at high resolutions, but we also saw a point where those additional cores and threads of the newer i9 and i7 series really do seem kind of beneficial. But this is the result of upgrading our test bench and being able to take a deeper look at something like this. If there's more you'd like for us to look into, let us know. I am working hard at getting us a 2700X to go on our AMD test bench so that not really an apples to apples comparison, but it is the newest for each vendor, because I'd like to bring more coverage and like to find a way to pull this information more into video style for you guys so that you can watch it and listen to it rather than just look at the charts. But if you want to look at the charts, again, it's down in the description below. This is Big Q with the WCCF Tech TV. Hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that we don't miss you in the next one.